Buenos dias, everyone. How is everybody doing? It is 10 a.m., so we are going to get started with this very special holiday that we are celebrating today. So my name is Emma Otegi. I write books for children. I write about Latin American history, and I write about what it's like to be a Latina growing up in the United States today. So here are some of my books. I am the author of this book, which is about a Cuban poet and independence leader named Jose Marti. I've also written about Pope Francis, who is the first pope from Latin America. And most recently, I published Silver Meadows Summer, which is a book about a girl named Carolina, who is 11 years old. Carolina moved from her house in Puerto Rico to upstate New York, a part of New York where there are lots of farms and fields and forests. And she and her friend find an abandoned cabin in the woods. So that is the cabin that Carolina and her friends find. Let me actually see if I can find you a cover of the book to show. Let's see. So you can see the cover. That is the cover of Silver Meadows Summer. That's my most recent book about a girl who is living in upstate New York after moving with her family from Puerto Rico. So this is a very normal April. It's a lot like other Aprils I remember. It reminds me of other Aprils because, for example, every morning around 7 or 8 a.m., all of the kids in my neighborhood get up and put on their backpacks and grab their lunch boxes and go to school. You mean you're not going to school every day? Oh my goodness. No one tells me anything. So, right. It turns out we are all at home trying to stay safe and keep ourselves and other people from getting this virus. So everyone's home and it's not at all a regular April. So what happens when school is closed and, people can't go and visit one another in April? Well, this year we kind of got rotten luck because this year a lot of important holidays fall in April. I know a lot of my friends this week are celebrating Passover from home. They're trying to connect with their friends and family via video chat or having a smaller gathering this year. I know I'm really sad to miss my family's Easter celebrations coming up on Sunday. Later in the month of April, I know many people in my life here in New York City are really saddened to know that their Ramadan observations are going to be interrupted this year. It's a hard month for holidays, all these holidays that were supposed to happen in April, or that will happen in April just differently. But there's another holiday in April, in addition to Passover and Easter and Ramadan. There is a holiday called International Unicorn Day. And today is International Unicorn Day. But don't worry, all of your favorite children's authors are banding together, and we are going to continue to celebrate International Unicorn Day from home. And that is because unicorns read too. So how do we celebrate International Unicorn Day? What is it? So today on Instagram and Facebook Live, you're going to see lots of children's authors reading from their books that have to do with unicorns. Unicorns, as you all know, are magical creatures. They have rainbow powers and glitter powers. And actually, I really like unicorns because there is something about unicorns that kids who speak Spanish, si hablas español en casa, this is something that you probably maybe know or could guess about unicorns that some other kids don't know, which is why are unicorns called unicorns? What's the most distinctive thing about a unicorn? Is it that they are white and sort of shimmery and silvery? Is it their long tails that sometimes are silver or gold and sometimes are rainbow? The most distinctive thing about a unicorn es que tienen one horn. And actually, so most animals that we know, like a cow has 2 horns, Unicorns just have one horn, and they're the only creature that has one horn. And the way you remember that es que uni, remember it starts with unicorn. Uni is like uno, it means one. So a unicorn es como uno, it has one horn. And this is my unicorn horn. I didn't have like a real unicorn horn at home, which was an oversight on my part. But I found this, I found some spare paper at home. I had like this wrapping paper and I just rolled it up and I poked 2 holes in the sides and I attached it with a string and now I have a unicorn horn. So if you do not have a unicorn horn, I recommend you make one later in the day. So today is a dark and dreary day where I am. I hope it is not a dark and dreary day where you are. But since it is a dark and dreary day, I'm thinking that it is the perfect time to read. And luckily, there are lots of books out there about unicorns. Lots of authors are going to be sharing their books today for International Unicorn Day. And I think sometimes on dark, dreary days when you're stuck inside, that's really the right time to read. So, you saw me mention my books before. I talked to you about my first book, Marti's Song for Freedom. I talked to you about my second book, Pope Francis. I talked to you about Silver Meadows Summer. But you're probably like, there are no unicorns in any of those books. Well, I have a book that is not yet published. You cannot buy it on a store you couldn't go to a store now anyway, so I apologize. But even if stores were open, you could not go to a store and get this book yet because it has not been published. This book is being published next month in May, and the title is The Unicorn Rescue Society, the Madre de Aguas of Cuba. So can everybody see that cover up on the screen? Leave me a comment if you can see it. So the Unicorn Rescue Society, the Madre de Aguas of Cuba, is a book that is coming out next month in May. It is part of a series, and even though it is not yet published, there are 2 things you can do. One is you can hear a sneak peek of it now, because I'm going to read you a chapter or 2 from the book today. So that is something that I normally don't do, but this is an opportunity we're all getting to hear this book before it comes out, hear a little bit of this book before it comes out. And you can also already order it. So you can go to bookshop.org is what I recommend, bookshop.org. And when you go to that website, you can actually order a book online. It'll be shipped from the warehouse to your door. So you don't have to go out and risk catching this virus to get books. And the money from your purchase is going to go to a local or independent bookstore. So if you're feeling worried about some of the local stores in your neighborhood, I know I'm like, oh, I hate that some of the stores in my neighborhood are closing. I love my local businesses. They're so important to me. Go to bookshop.org and you can order your books there. And you can already order the Unicorn Rescue Society, the Madre de Aguas of Cuba, so that when this book is published, you will be the first person to get your hands on it. Now, this book is a part of a series. So this series is by my good friend, Adam Gidwitz. So Adam has lots of books in the Unicorn Rescue Society series. He has the first one. There is this book, which is co-written by Adam Gidwitz and Joe Bruchac. There is this one, which is co-written by Adam Gidwitz and my friend David Bowles right there. And all of these books are about different mythological creatures. So Adam works on all of the books, but I love Adam. He's a very good friend of mine, but he doesn't know everything. So some of these books, the kids go to all sorts of different places. So people go to, so for example, this book takes place near the border between Texas and Mexico, where I know Adam has visited, but he maybe hasn't lived there and spent a lot of time there. And so David is actually somebody who lives on the border, who knows that culture really, really well, who's from that culture, and he helped Adam write that book. So when Adam wanted to write a book about the kids from the Unicorn Rescue Society going to Cuba, he reached out to me because my family's from Cuba. And Cuba is a part of our lives. So that's how I came to work on the Unicorn Rescue Society, the Madre de Aguas of Cuba. So you might be wondering a few things, like, Okay, I know what a unicorn is. I know that it's unicorn. You're probably thinking, I know who you are, but what is a Madre de Aguas and where is this Cuba place anyway? So I'll tell you. Cuba is an island in the Caribbean Sea. So if you're thinking, where is Cuba? What is this place? I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine an island that is very, very green, where there is rainfall and sun, where there are big palm trees, and not like the little like bendy coconut trees that you see sometimes, but very, very tall, gray palms. And we call those palm trees palmas reales, royal palms, because they are so grand and majestic. So you can imagine what Cuba looks like. And now you can open your eyes. I want you to ask yourself, have you ever been to Florida? If you have ever been to Florida, maybe you've been to Florida to go on vacation, maybe you live in Florida and you're not having a dark and dreary day today, maybe it's sunny there. If you've been to Florida to visit relatives ever, Florida is really close to Cuba. If you've ever been to Florida, you've practically been in Cuba. It's only 90 miles away. That's not very far. A long time ago, you used to be able to take a boat from Florida to Cuba. That's how nearby it is. It's very nearby. So Cuba is this place it's an island. It is very lush. It is very close to the United States. It's one of our closest neighbors. And today, over a million people from Cuba live in the United States. So Cuban Americans are a big group of people. There are a lot of us living in the United States. Somos latinos y también somos cubanos y también somos americanos. So if you're like, why is it important that I know about Cuba? I want to tell you that even if you don't know any Cuban Americans right now, maybe because you're in quarantine and you're not meeting a lot of people, I promise you that when you grow up, Cuban Americans are going to be a part of your life. There are a lot of Cuban Americans living in the United States today. And that's why it's so important for me that kids know about Cuba and know about our culture, because these are our friends and our neighbors. And so that's why it's so important to me. Oh, another thing about Cuba. Cuba, the island, if you look at it on a map, it looks a little bit like a crocodile. So if you're ever looking at a map and you're like, what's that crocodile-looking island? That's Cuba. And what is the Madre de Aguas? So the Madre de Aguas, that big scary serpent you're seeing on your screen right now, is a mythological creature. It actually exists in many cultures. So many cultures talk about the Madre de Aguas. But in Cuba, the way we talk about the Madre de Aguas is a little different. The mythologists, the people who study the mythology of Cuba, people who went to little towns in Cuba to interview people about their ideas about the Madre de Aguas, discovered that even though you might hear people say that the Madre de Aguas is a sea serpent, and in many cultures she is, for Cubans, the Madre de Aguas actually lives in fresh water. She lives in wells and in ponds and in rivers. And does she look very nice to you? She looks like really nice. Like I would totally want a Madre de Aguas as a house pet. Like I think she could fit in a little tank, right? No, she's not nice. She's not a nice creature. She can be mean. She can be really scary. Farmers used to be terrified of her. Farmers used to see her in their well and be like, oh my goodness, there's a Madre de Aguas in my well. But everybody really respected the Madre de Aguas because the story said that the Madre de Aguas of Cuba was responsible for making sure that Cubans never ran out of water. If you saw a Madre de Aguas of Cuba in your well, it might be scary, but it would mean that your well would never run dry. And if you were a farmer, that is, of course, very important because you always have enough water to grow your crops. That is the Madre de Aguas of Cuba. And in this book, The Unicorn Rescue Society, The Madre de Aguas of Cuba, Elliot and Uchenna and Professor Fauna, who are the heart of the Unicorn Rescue Society, go to Cuba because these evil guys, the Schmoke brothers, these evil schmokes are trying to poison the Madre de Aguas and hurt her. So it's lucky that Elliot and Uchenna and Professor Fauna are on the scene. If you're not already familiar with Elliot and Uchenna and Professor Fauna, I just want to tell you a little bit about them. That's Uchenna. Uchenna loves music. She has great rhythm. She is super cool. Elliot is less cool. Elliot is the sort of person who on an adventure is like, that guy who wants to make sure that you are leaving on time and have packed enough emergency supplies. That's kind of like who Elliot is. And this is Professor Fauna. Professor Fauna is eccentric but passionate. He is a very unusual man, but he cares a lot about creatures. And so Elliot and Uchenna and Professor Fauna all have different strengths and traits. So I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to read you 2 chapters from the Unicorn Rescue Society, the Madre de Aguas of Cuba. So, again, this book is not yet published, but you can go ahead and order it. It's on bookshop.org. And you'll see, since it's not published, I'm reading you a printout of it from my computer because it's not yet published. So, are you ready to read? Here we go. This is from chapter 4. It's not the beginning. Elliot and Uchenna are already on their way to Cuba when we start this section, okay? Here we go. Uchenna found a grease-stained rag behind their seats, and now Elliot was gingerly using it to get vomit off his shoes. Thankfully, Jersey was very small, so there was only a little bit, but it was still incredibly gross. "It's very nutty," said Elliot. "Everything we do with Professor Fauna is nutty," said Uchenna. "I'm talking about the..." Elliot looked up from his shoes to see Uchenna grinning at him. "Oh," he said, "very funny." "It's probably because I feed him so many almond bars," Professor Fauna added. Elliot's stomach lurched. And then Uchenna began to hum. "No," said Elliot, "not about this. Please." But Uchenna was already singing in the style of an old-fashioned crooner. "The way to Cuba is bumpy, and little Jersey is blue. He throws up something quite lumpy all over Elliot's shoes." And if you haven't met Jersey yet, this is Jersey. He is a little blue devil that Elliot and Uchenna have as a pet. Elliot was still scraping puke off his laces. "Can I just say I hated that one?" Uchenna snickered. "Shall we return to the business at hand?" Professor Fauna said. He squinted into the bright clouds as the plane continued to dance. "This sea serpent is referred to as the Madre de Aguas." "The Mother of Waters?" said Uchenna. "Muy bien. They say that without the Madre de Aguas, the Mother of Waters, there would be no fresh water anywhere in Cuba," Professor Fauna scoffed. "Now to me, saying that the fresh water of an entire island depends on one creature sounds like magic. And as you know, the creatures of myth and legend are not magic. They are creatures. But they often have evolutionary mutations that can seem like magic." "What evolutionary mutation could possibly control the fresh water of an entire island?" Elliot asked. "I do not know. Perhaps it purifies the water by passing it through its gills. Or perhaps it draws the fresh water up from the aquifer somehow." Jersey was clawing at the compartment of the backpack where his almond bars were kept. "No," Elliot said to him. "Under no circumstances, Jersey." Jersey began whining plaintively. "Not a chance, you little puke devil." Professor Fauna went on. "Many islands in the Caribbean tell stories of the Madre de Aguas, and she goes by many names and takes many forms. But of course, this makes sense. There are many different people in the Caribbean, so of course they would talk about the Madre de Aguas in different ways. Anyway, in Cuba, people all over the island used to talk of the enormous serpent living in their wells and their ponds wherever there was fresh water. But lately, fewer and fewer people have seen the Madre de Aguas. It could be there were once many Madre de Aguas in Cuba and only one survives today. Or it could be that there was only ever one, moving between different bodies of water, but today she hides herself from all but a few human eyes. I do not know. What I also do not know is this. Where is the Madre de Aguas of Cuba now? Rosa was one of the few people who the Madre de Aguas still visited, and she has not seen the serpent for some weeks. Professor Fana suddenly pointed through the windshield. There, he exclaimed, the Miami airport. This is where we are meeting Ioannis, Rosa's son. Uchenna and Elliot looked out of the window. Peeking through heavy clouds were the runways and parking lots of a huge airport. Wait, you're going to land at an airport, said Uchenna? That's a first. We usually just plow into trees or off a cliff or something. Do you have clearance to land at the Miami airport, Elliot asked. I'm pretty sure you need official permission or A gigantic commercial passenger jet buzzed just above their heads. The Phoenix bobbed and weaved in the enormous power of the jet's wake. Professor Fana wrestled with the plane's controls, which seemed to do nothing. The plane dipped, nose down, toward the tarmac. Goodness gracious, Elliot screamed. The plane was screaming too, the wind ripping past its wings. And then, at last, the yoke finally leveled off and the wheels touched down on the tarmac at a distant end of the runway, far from the main terminals and commercial jets. They rolled to a stop. I think I am getting better at this, Professor Fana exclaimed. Jersey smiled at him. Then he put his little blue head between Elliot's legs. No, Elliot cried, and Jersey puked on his shoes again. We have time for just one more chapter. Standing on the tarmac by a chain-link fence at the very end of the Miami airport runway was a tall young man with thick black hair. He was surrounded by more than a dozen suitcases. He waved at the professor. Ioannis, Professor Fana cried. He looked back at Elliot and Uchenna. This is our friend. Said Uchenna, staring out the window. Does he think those bags will all fit in the Phoenix? Elliot had returned to cleaning Jersey Devil vomit from his shoes. He looked up and out the window to see a man standing amidst an island of bags. Professor Fana stopped the plane, threw his door open, and hopped out. The warm, humid Florida air hit Uchenna. She clambered down and followed Professor Fana over to the man with the suitcases. Ioannis, ¿qué tal estás? Ioannis smiled and embraced the professor, and they kissed each other on one cheek. That's Ioannis and all of his many, many suitcases. Then Ioannis turned to Uchenna and Elliot. These must be Elliot and Uchenna, he said, and shook both their hands very seriously. I'm Ioannis. Uchenna tried to smile at him, but she was distracted by all the bags. There were so many suitcases and bags around Ioannis' feet that she thought he must have disobeyed every public service announcement ever made and agreed to watch the suitcases of every other passenger at the Miami airport. They couldn't all belong to him. I see you're looking at my luggage, Ioannis said. I'll have to rearrange some things, but don't worry, it'll all fit. I hope this isn't rude, said Uchenna, but there is no chance that will all fit in the Phoenix. Even if it did, I'm pretty sure planes have weight limits, Elliot added. For safety. He glanced back at the Phoenix where Jersey was peeking through a small, round window. He seemed to be staring at Ioannis' baggage, too. Don't worry about my stuff. Any Cuban who goes home knows how to pack a lot in a little space. I wish we didn't have to, but we do. Why? Ioannis bent over and started to open some of the bags. Hold this open, Ioannis said to me, handing Elliot a large Ziploc and pouring a bottle of vitamins into it. It's a long story. Basically, it's hard for Cubans to get all the things they need. The Cuban government makes it tough, and then the U.S. government goes and makes it even harder by imposing an embargo. While he was talking, Ioannis pulled out more vitamins, several bags of powdered milk, nuts, dried fruit, and a big box of soup. Between the Cuban and U.S. governments, my mother can't get the things she needs to live. Milk, meat, medicines, machines. Ioannis explained, Ya tú sabes, those in power are always making the lives of regular people miserable. Anyway, whenever a Cuban American goes back to Cuba to see his family, he pretty much always brings a few things. Elliot gestured at the bags. A few things? My man, Ioannis chuckled darkly. This is nada. You should see what I bring when I fly commercial. Ioannis turned his focus to packing, and Uchenna started gazing around the Miami airport. Suddenly, she muttered, "Unbelievable!" She pointed to a large airplane hangar at the end of the runway. A large cargo plane was being loaded. The plane was silver, but the wings and tail were painted black, and on the tail was a snake-like S. Uchenna groaned. "They are everywhere." Elliot came and stand next to her. "Seriously, they took multinational corporation to a ridiculous extreme." "Who's that?" Ioannis asked, shoving a pair of sneakers into a crevice about the size of a single sock. Professor Fana passed him another pair of sneakers, which Ioannis somehow shoved into the same space and said, "The Schmoke brothers, billionaire industrialists, collectors of mythical creatures, villains of the lowest order." "More powerful rich guys," Ioannis replied, "exploiting the world, its people, its animals, its resources. No surprise." Then he straightened up. "But someone was talking about these Schmokes recently." He tapped his chin, trying to remember what he'd heard. Elliot squinted. "Can you see what they're loading?" "Looks like barrels," Uchenna said. "What is in them?" Elliot shrugged. "Pure evil, probably." Ioannis laughed out loud at that. "Elliot, I like you." Elliot grinned. Then Ioannis stood up and dusted off his hand. Elliot and Uchenna looked around. Their mouths fell open. There was a single suitcase at his feet. "Are you kidding me?" Elliot exclaimed. "What?" said Ioannis. "I told you that Cubans know how to pack." "That thing must be as dense as a black hole," Elliot said. Ioannis shrugged and picked it up and hefted it toward the Phoenix. Professor Fana held the door open for him, and he threw the bag in the back. "Next stop," announced the professor, Cubita la Bella. Muchísimas gracias for listening, everyone. It has been so much fun to talk to you on this dark and dreary International Unicorn Day. I was reading to you today from the Unicorn Rescue Society, the Madre de Aguas of Cuba. If you want to read the book, you can pre-order it. I recommend going to bookshop.org so that you can have it when it comes out. And I see that we got 2 questions. Oh, these were not actually questions. These were just many, many pictures of unicorns, which I am so happy to receive. So the Madre de Aguas Unicorn Rescue Society, shop on bookshop.org. Keep ordering books. Keep your local businesses, local bookstores in business. Bookshop.org. And up next, if you want to keep following International Unicorn Day, my friend Sarah Bess Durst is going to be reading from her book about unicorns on Facebook. And then at 11 o'clock, my friend Emily Bliss is going to be reading from Unicorn Princess right here on Instagram. Muchísimas gracias, que lean muchos más, and I'll catch you next time. Adios!